Okay, we're in Chapter 8, paragraph or Halacha Vav, and the Rambam is describing the nature of the world to come, and he disparages the idea which he associates with the Arabs of a physical world to come, and he says that these things are only because the person possesses a body. The soul, which for this Rambam is the essence of the person, the value of the person, the significance, the meaning, the nobility of the person is all in the soul. And since you go into the world to come with only the soul, without the body, so therefore there can't be any relevance of these kinds of activities in the world to come. And don't think that you're losing something. Well, then what is there to do? Because the soul has its own pleasures, and those pleasures are much more valuable than the pleasures of the body, which is what I tried to explain last time. Now he describes the position of the soul in the world to come in direct terms, though, of course, the details and the real significance of it is something that we can't really explain. We haven't experienced it. The great good of the condition of the soul in the world to come, it's impossible in this world to understand it, v'leida osa, to know it. Everything that we have in this world that's good is always associated with the guf, with the body. And therefore that is what we desire. That good which is awaiting a person in the world to come is very good. It's not comparable to any goods in this world. You can do it as a parable, but you can't do it in terms of its actual nature. See if I can explain this to you a little bit. You see how a parable works. Take Aesop's fables. So you have the parable of the fox and the grapes, right? The fox wants the grapes. They're in a walled garden. There's only a thin crack in the wall, so he starves himself to the point where he's thin enough to slip through the crack, gets into the garden, and eats the grapes, and stuffs himself on grapes, by which he becomes so fat he can't get back out through the crack. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in the garden, so he has to starve himself in front of the grapes. He has to starve himself to the point where he becomes thin enough to slip outside the crack, and then he's just as hungry as he was before outside because he's lost all of that nutrition that he got from the grapes. Okay? Now, what's going on there? To understand that parable, you have to humanize the fox. You have to think he knows what he's doing and he's planning, and he had a short-sighted idea, and then he realized it was short-sighted, and he came out and regretted what he did. That's not a fox. Excuse me. That's not a fox at all. Right? So you can't take it straight. You can't learn from the fox what it would be like for a human being to make a mistake, because a fox's life is too different from a human being to understand what it is to make a mistake. So if all you had was foxes, you have no clue what it is for a human being to make a decision, then regret it later because it was short-sighted and he ended up without the benefit that he anticipated. You couldn't learn that from a fox. So if all you have is the fox, you would never be able to dream up the intended meaning of it as a fable about human life. In a similar way, if all you have is what's going on in this world, so you say, well, the world to come has such a condition that if you knew what it was, you'd have a very great desire for it, like your desire for XYZ in this world. Yeah, but it isn't like this world, and the desire wouldn't be like the desire in this world. So all you get is this bare skeleton lots of desire, but you have no clue of what the desire is like. Just like you imagine a creature which is only capable of experiencing physical pleasures, and you try to explain love to such a creature. What would you get? How far would you get? You wouldn't be able to explain it at all. Love is a pleasure that involves far more than your animal capabilities. So he's saying it's impossible to understand it. We could make a mashal for it, but you don't get any acquaintance with the concepts that would describe what's really going on there. Aval b'derech ha'emes, we look at things realistically. Shenaroch tovas hanefesh b'olam haba kamo tovas haguf b'olam hazeh b'machal b'mishta ein okein. If you're going to tell me that the way in which you could understand the world, the pleasure of the world to come, is via pleasures in this world, and just think of them as analogous, it's not going to work. The amount of good that you get in the world to come is, by our standards here, beyond all evaluation. There's not even an imagination that who could grasp it. Who Sha'ama David, King David says in Psalms, Ma rav tuvcha asher tzafanta l'reyecha po'alta l'chosim bach. Now, how great is that goodness means it's greater than I can grasp. I'm overwhelmed by the thought of it. It's greater than I can possibly grasp. And you can understand this idea also if you're dealing with children. You see imagine you have the following conversation with a 7-year-old. I see Uncle Dave. Uncle Dave's 30 years old. He's working very hard. Very hard. He's depriving himself. He's sweating over something. Tell me, how much candy is he going to get? What? What? I mean, candy? He's not going to get candy. I don't believe you. No one will work that hard if he's going to get candy. Well, else would he work? What else is there but just to get candy? So you say to a 7-year-old, when you're 15, you won't ask that question. Because when you're 15, you'll understand there are other things that are worthwhile besides candy. But for a 7-year-old, maybe it's only candy. Right? They say, well, I'll tell you what, he's going to get something which is important to him as candy is for you. Really? Don't forget that the 30-year-old also could have candy, and he turns his back on it. The 7-year-old can't understand that. He can't imagine that. Candy's all there is. So there's a gap there where you can't even make a good analogy to what's going on in his case. It involves capabilities, parts of an adult's capabilities, which he doesn't even possess yet. Very rare to have a 7-year-old who's excited and lit up by a new idea. Well, maybe I'm choosing the dates with her. Get a 5-year-old. I don't mind. Ideas don't have that role for him. He certainly couldn't appreciate the beauty of a mathematical proof. And there's real beauty there. There's real beauty in mathematical proof. Certain types of reasoning are very beautiful as reasoning. You have to know some mathematics and you have to have appreciation for it in order to appreciate that. And say, yeah, you know what? It's sort of like the beauty in pictures. Or it's sort of like the beauty in music. No, it isn't. It isn't like the beauty in pictures. It's like the beauty in music. It's a different kind of thing, which has. Or take those two. Is the beauty in pictures like the beauty in music? What do they have in common? One is something you can get right away. The other one takes 20 minutes to hear. The music requires memory. The picture doesn't require memory in order to appreciate. So that's what the Rambam is saying here. It's something that beyond our ability to understand because of our present condition and our limitations. Now he says something very, very important, which is going to be a big deal in chapters 9 and 10. Kama Hama David v'his Ava l'chai olam haba. How greatly King David was drawn by and desired the life in the world to come. His Ava. I told you the word taiva here is a word that has to be dealt with, because taiva in many contexts is regarded as negative. Here, King David is being described as having a taiva for olam haba. Shenemar, one of the verses in Psalms, Lulei ha'amanti l'ros b'tuv Hashem be'eretz chaim. If I wouldn't have the hope, the belief that I will see the goodness of Hashem in the land of life, meaning the land of the world to come, then I'd be lost. That's the mainstay of my condition in the world. And this is going to be important, because in the next chapter he's going to say that the prophets and the sages all desired this, which means to say that it's good to desire it. Now, some of you have already heard, and the Rambam is going to make a big deal out of this in the 10th chapter, that in order to serve God, lishma, in order to serve God in the highest possible way, you're supposed to serve God without any thought of reward. Not for any reward, even the world to come. And now it sounds like you're putting a person in a difficult position. You're telling a person you should desire the world to come, but when you serve God, don't take that into account. Well, that's not easy. Here I am, I'm told, do X. Yes, if I do X, so what? Well, what's going to happen? One of the things that's going to happen is it's going to get you into the world to come. That's good. I like that. Now, it will, and you should desire to get to the world to come, and you should know that this will get you to the world to come, but when you do it, only do it out of love for God. Don't do it for the world to come. That may sound as if it's impossible. If I do X, I know that X will give me, as a result, a Z that I desire, how could I not be doing X, at least in part, to get the thing that I desire? How could that be part of my motivation? This is one of the many things that I struggled with for a long time, from a philosophical point of view, and I cooked up a whole long, complicated, sophisticated explanation, and then I realized that there's a simple way to answer it, based on the writings of John Searle, and I'll give it to you when we get to the 10th chapter of your session. Anyway, Kvar hodiyunu chachamim rishonim shetoas olam haba ein koach ba'adam la'asiga al burya. They use this phrase al burya over and over again. It's impossible. The sages have informed us it's impossible to understand realistically, I would say. Gottleib yofyo ve'atzma. Its greatness and its beauty and its essence is only known. Only God Himself knows that. Shekol tovos misnabim behen hanavim liyisrael ein el dvarim shel guf shenenu behem Yisrael b'yemos hamelech Mashiach. All the prophecies in the prophets do not mention the world to come. They may hint at it, and that hint is exposed by the oral tradition, but all of the things that the prophets prophesy as results of good action are this worldly pleasures. That raises a question. Why is that? Why is it that they are so preoccupied only with promises for this world? The reason they do that is because there aren't words for the prophets to deliver to us that would convey the message. So it's an inherent limitation. But still, there's no mention of it, or no direct mention. There are hints, but no direct mention. Now, if the prophets had said, listen, really, we can't understand it. I can't understand it. But let me give you at least a similarity with which I can communicate it to you. They didn't do that because then, in your mind, since the only information you have is the similarity, you'll associate the similarity with the reality. And that will be a gigantic diminution of the idea. So you're talking to the 7-year-old, and he sees his 30-year-old working to become, the U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. And he says, how much candy is he earning? And he said, come on, it's like, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a dimion. You like candy, right? But the most pleasurable candy for you is a chocolate bar, right? All the other ones can't compare. So for him, is this like a chocolate bar? No, it isn't. And not only no, it isn't, but if the 7-year-old thinks that his 30-year uncle is working for a chocolate bar, when he's 9 years old, he's going to look at his uncle and say, you're working for a chocolate bar? What's the matter with you? Right? It's going to reduce the reality in a way that communicates a very wrong attitude. So Rambam says the prophets didn't even offer to give us comparisons. Hushi Yeshivat Omar, Ay lo ros elokim zelasecha, yas el mechakalo. The prophet Isaiah said, oh, no eye other than yours, God, has seen the tov that you are preparing for those who are waiting for you. Kolomar, hatov shelo rosa osa ayin, navi v'lo rosa ela elokim osa elokim levado l'odam shemechakalo. This means no eye saw, means not even the eye of a prophet, has seen that which you have prepared, which is waiting for a person who deserves it. The Talmudic sages said the prophets all prophesied about the time of the Messiah. The time of the Messiah, I have to classify the vocabulary here. I should tell you, this is important just to keep things straight. The phrase Olam Haba in Hebrew, the world to come in English, is used differently by different authors. So you just have to know that it's used different ways, and you have to ask yourself each time you read someone, what does he mean by it? For some people, Olam Haba means the time of the Messiah. The time of the Messiah is in this world, in the physical world, with the physical body, especially according to the Rambam, and the laws of nature are operating, and certain things are different. The Jewish people are not under the control of other nations. They have their own sovereignty. The rest of the people of the world know that the Jewish picture of the world is correct, that the Torah is the truth. They all accept our leadership, but that's all. There'll be agriculture, there'll be politics, and there'll be the king, the Messiah will live and die, and be replaced by another king. And in some people's vocabulary, Olam Haba refers to the time of the Messiah. Another possibility, what happens right after death? Right after death, the soul and the body separate. The soul goes into a holding pattern or a waiting position, waiting for resurrection, while the body is buried and disintegrates. Well, some people use Olam Haba for that condition of the soul waiting for resurrection. That's another thing. And then Olam Haba is used also, as the Rambam is using it, for the condition which is eternal, which goes on forever after all of those other things, where the soul is detached from the body and remains in that condition forever. So when you, as I say, when you read someone and it says Olam Haba, you have to be careful to understand. The Rambam here is quite consistent. Olam Haba is the final condition. Yeah, question?
I did, yeah. Just to go back to the chocolate bar example you were talking about before, doesn't the Torah sometimes use concepts or representations to certain things that we don't understand, like saying like God's desires or God's knowledge, even though we wouldn't say that He has desires and knowledge?
Yes, and it's an important observation, and it's an important problem. We do use descriptions of things which aren't true, like all the anthropomorphisms that are used with respect to God, of which there must be hundreds in the Tanakh. Now, the Rambam treats that in the Moreh Nevuchim in a couple of places, and he says that, in other words, your question, based on what I read, is that we've been told that if you use something that's far less than the reality, you're going to degrade the reality. That's true. The question is, what's the alternative? And the Rambam says there are people, this is common for people, especially when people start out in life, that the world, existence, is physical things or the qualities of physical things. Full stop. Period. End of story. If you tell such a person, I have news for you. I want to describe Q for you. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is that it's not a physical thing and it's not a quality of physical thing. The person will say, don't waste my time. Because if it's not a physical thing and not a quality of physical thing, it isn't. It just isn't, because that's all there is. These people were all brought up in Russia. you find that they preach their materialism so aggressively that when you talk about something that's not physical, they just go blank, right? So now the Rambam says, what are we going to do with such a person? If we tell him the truth that God is not physical, he will reject God, he'll reject us, he'll reject our tradition, and leave. That's a gigantic loss. If we tell him that tell him that he is physical, or at least speak about him in physical ways and not qualify it, he'll get the idea that he's physical, he'll accept the fact that he's real, he'll understand that he's very powerful, he'll understand that he's running what's going on in the world and so forth and so on. He'll realize that he has to pray to him, he'll realize that he has to serve him, right? With this wrong idea. So which is worse? Believing in him and serving him with the wrong idea versus rejecting the right idea. He's not going to get the right idea. He's not going to accept it. And leaving. Obviously, rejecting the right idea so he doesn't get the truth and leaving is worse than having a wrong idea and staying within the system. And then the hope is that as he matures, you get to the point where you can explain it to him. If you read the Rambam carefully, this is for people who study the Rambam, if you put two and two together, he has stages. The first stage is where you simply leave him with his misimpression that God is physical, and then you talk about what God does and so on and so forth and so on, how he relates to us. Second stage is where he'll trust you. You say to him, listen, all the verses that you're reading describe God as physical. I want you to know the truth is that he isn't physical. I want you to know that. How is that? And what the verses mean? We'll get to that in 10 years. But I want you to be aware of the truth. If he trusts you, sometimes when a person has your trust, he'll accept what you say even if he doesn't understand it. He'll just say, well, here are the right words, and I have to work to myself to a point where I'll be able to understand it. So I think that's the second stage. And the third stage is where you educate him to the point where, number one, he can understand the existence of something which isn't physical. And number two, he can understand what it means to speak in ways that communicate a facet of that thing, but not the true reality of the thing. In particular, with respect to God, you describe his actions rather than his nature. They are his actions, but they sound like they're describing his nature. It's not really. We spoke about this. So that's why, in the case of anthropomorphism, Rambam does it's not parallel to the case of the world to come. You don't have to understand or take account of the world to come to be part of the group, to be part of the clan, to be part of the project. You're missing out on a piece of the picture. That's right. You're missing out on a piece of the picture. Okay. The truth is, every one of us is missing out on some pieces. Nobody's got everything under control. Okay, this is a major piece. It's one of the 13 principles of faith. Okay, fine. But it's not like rejecting God and going into the forest, and becoming an aborigine. That's not the effect. So here, the strategy was, don't reduce it by giving it any description that we can understand. Just tell the person that it's valuable beyond belief, and he'll trust us. He'll trust him for that, and then without any positive understanding of what it is, and don't make a comparison, because the comparison will degrade it. That's the policy. Okay, so now so now the world to come. That's interesting. Does that mean it doesn't exist now? Certainly sounds like it, doesn't it? The world to come, something's coming, it's not here now. But that's a mistake, according to the Rambam anyway. The Rambam is putting a lot in here, which he spells out elsewhere. He says it's not that. That world is not here. Our world is here. And our world is going to disappear. And that world is going to replace it. That's what the words world to come would lead you to think. But it's not correct. Elahare matsui v'omed. That thing that we call the world to come is in existence now. Now, how do we know that? Well, the pasuk that we read above says, Asher tzafanta, that thing, that good which you have hidden. You don't hide things that don't exist. It's not necessary. They don't exist. You hide things that do exist. Po'alta, that you made. ולא קראו העולם הבא אלא מפני שאוסן החיים בואין לו לאדם אחר חיי העולם הזה, שלקיימים בו בגוף ונפש. וזהו הנמצא לכל אדם בראשונה. He says, when you talk about the world to come, and it makes you think of there is a world which is here, there's another world which isn't here, this world that's here is going to pass away, be replaced by that world, that's the wrong association. So if so, why is the phrase used? Because for each individual person, he is in a world now, and later he will be in another world, another state of being. Later, after death, when his soul is connected to Ziva Shechina, that's a different condition for him. So it's a condition that's coming to him. It's the contrast between the condition you're in now, when you're alive with soul and body, to the condition that will come to you after death. For each individual person, it's something coming to him, but not globally. Now, the Rambam hints here at a position that he takes. Most people, I think, are not aware of this, but the Rambam's position, which is in other writings, is that this world, the way we operate in this world, is going to be forever. This world's not going to disappear. It's not going to be replaced. That's if you take his words literally and take them globally, that's what he's telling you here. And you'll say to me, but what about the 6,000 years and the 7,000 years, right? Isn't that written in the Gemara? Yep, it's written in the Gemara, and the Rambam rejects it. He rejects it. So, I mean, the Rambam rejects something written in the Gemara? Yes, because he has other Gemaras against it. And he sees it as a conflict of opinions. It is, after all, written in the Gemara as the opinion of one sage. Or maybe two sages, because they disagree with the 7,000 or 7th and 8,000, but it's only two sages. And there are other things written in the Gemara which oppose it, and there are verses in the Tanakh which oppose it. So the Rambam says explicitly in the Moreh Nevuchim that he doesn't accept it. Now, I think here you have a very interesting situation. When the Ramchal describes the idea that almost everybody else has, that this whole world disappears and is replaced by another world, you have to ask yourself, which one is more intuitive, which one is more natural, which one would you think of as more appropriate? The Ramchal uses the phrase, Gazra Chachmaso, which means God's wisdom decreed, which usually in the mouth of the Ramchal means this comes from a higher wisdom. There's a problem here, and it needs to be resolved, and it comes from God's higher wisdom, and therefore it means it's not a simple thing. Let's ask, is there anything wrong, disadvantageous with the Rambam's picture? God creates a world, and there's a physical world, and in that physical world you have people who are souls and bodies, and they have commandments, they live their lives, and they're judged, and the vast majority, the soul goes into the world to come, and that goes on forever. There's no capstone, there's no ceiling. God is always making new souls, always making new bodies, always having, and then the people go on, and that process goes on forever. Do you hear any terrible demerit there? Any terrible violation of what you would think of as goodness or kindness and so on and so on? Indeed, if you cut it short, what you're saying is the good that God is going to do to the recipients is to a finite number of recipients. You might ask, why would God be satisfied with only a finite number of recipients? Why not just keep it going and surpass every finite limit, as a growing progression does? And keep it. What's wrong with keeping it going? I don't hear any inherent logical failure in this. Ramchal says, God's wisdom decreed that the time of testing should be finite and the time of reward should be infinite. Well, okay, but in the Rambam's picture, that's true for each person, isn't it? Each person's time of testing is finite, and each person's time of reward is infinite. Why must the whole project sink? To me, it's not obvious. So I think we should look at what the Rambam is saying as his view. Now, there are verses which he could take literally, and others have to say, yeah, I know what the verse says, but there's really a limitation in it. It doesn't say so, but really it's only for a particular time and not for another time. You can do that. You could do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's what we call a dochak. It's something which requires you to push something out of its normal context. Ein chadash tachas hashemesh, says King Solomon. King Solomon. Nothing new under the sun. According to the other view, there'll be new things under the sun, all right? The whole sun and the whole of our physical reality is going to disappear. We're going to be replaced by an entirely new reality. That's new, all right? That's not old stuff. So, you have to say, no. Those words are meant only to apply to this period of history. But then, okay. Chok v'lo yavor. Because Baruch Hu created the world with a law that will not pass away. So you say, will not pass away in this phase of history, but it will pass away in another phase of history. Okay, you could say that, but nothing in the verse gives you a hint that it's limited in that way. The Chazal say, Olam kiminhago noheg. The world carries on in its normal fashion. Okay. So you say, yeah, it carries on in its normal fashion for a while, but not forever. Who said so? The words don't say for a while. They just say that's what happens. Ein bein olam hazeh limos Mashiach. Notice this phraseology. There's nothing that distinguishes this world from the time of the Messiah. Now you see someone reading that says, you're opposing this world to the time of the Messiah, so the time of the Messiah must be olam haba, because it's not this world. So you can see where that phraseology could come out. Okay, the only difference is, according to Shmuel, Shibud Malchios, the fact that we're under the control of foreign nations, and that's going to cease. So that certainly doesn't allow for a wholesale disappearance of nature and the wholesale disappearance of the physical world. And it doesn't allow for that. So again, you say, yeah, but Shmuel was only talking about this period of history. You see, he wasn't talking about beyond that. Maybe, but you have to say that over and over again to statements which don't look limited, right? The Rambam reads them straight and without qualification. Yeah.
How would Rambam react or argue against someone taking a position of physicalism, that your consciousness is strictly tied to your biology, and once that ceases, so does your consciousness? You more or less go to oblivion, and there is really no world to come. Yeah. Consciousness is a byproduct of neurons.
Yeah. How would Rambam respond to the thesis of physicalism, that consciousness is nothing but neural activity in the brain, and that therefore when your body dies, everything dies? Right. How would the Rambam respond? I can give you a list of 30 leading, outstanding philosophers who reject that thesis. Philosophers of science who reject that thesis. That thesis is very, very strictly compromised. It's very powerfully criticized. It's not an obvious thing at all. On the contrary, some of the best contemporary philosophers over the last 40 or 50 years have rejected it. So I think the first thing he would say is, you're quoting something that's very controversial, and that therefore it certainly has no authority as it stands. Right? So whether you want Thomas Nagel or David Chalmers or Galen Strawson, or there was a book that came out from Oxford about 5 years ago called The Waning of Materialism. To wane means to fade away, right? 27 different authors, top-notch philosophers, all of whom wrote papers against materialism.
And Karl Popper would be one of them, right? He was a big philosopher of science who put forth like the falsification, that the object of science is to falsify rather than to prove.
Yeah, but that's Popper's not relevant here. I mean,
He's a philosopher of
and
science. Maybe.
yeah, but he didn't take a position on
Okay.
physicalism.
I didn't know that.
No, and falsification is a mistake. Falsification is a mistake. It's wrong. I wrote something on that once upon a time. I was just want to say. I'll have to speak to you later. I'm teaching now. Falsification is not a good criterion for what counts as bona fide scientific hypothesis. And again, I didn't make this up, but many people know that it's wrong. Even Roger Penrose, who is one of the most outstanding scientists in the world, he wrote a book called The Road to Reality, 1,000 pages long, a summary of all contemporary science with all the mathematics. And in it, he has a section against Popper. And he points out that there are bona fide scientific hypotheses which are impossible to falsify. And they're bona fide, and you could have reason to believe them. Because you see, falsification leaves out the possibility of verification. Why should my ability to show it false be the criterion of whether it's scientifically meaningful? Right. What about my ability to show that it's true? Right. Shouldn't that count? And there are certain hypotheses which you can't show to be false, but could show to be true. So why isn't the ability to show them true qualify them as genuine science? That's one of the many mistakes that Popper made. So as a criterion for dividing science from non-science, falsification is a failure. It's a failure. Okay, so that's not going to fly. Okay, so now that's where we. Okay, fine. So now, in the ninth chapter, which I'm just going to begin. Now that we know that the reward for mitzvos and the good which we merit if we follow and preserve the way of Hashem, that is written in the Torah, we know that that reward is the world to come. Now, as you'll see in this chapter, he has doubles over and over and over again. It's never A, it's always A and B. But the A changes and the B changes. And here he says, mitzvos and following the way of Hashem. Isn't mitzvos the way of Hashem? Isn't it the same thing? Okay, you'll see how this goes. So it's now that we know that the world to come, Shenemar, as I explained to you, in order to do good for you means the place that's holy goods is the world to come. And you'll have length of days, where the days are long because they're infinite, eternal in the world to come. The punishment of the wicked, that have abandoned the ways of righteousness that are written in the Torah, that's being cut off from the world to come. So if that's true, mahu zeh shekosu b'chol aTorah kula im tishma'u yagir lechem v'im lo tishma'u yikra lechem. The Torah, meaning the 5 books of Moses and the prophets and the writings, are full of warnings and promises. If you do well, if you follow the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to follow, A, B, C, D, and E will happen. And A, B, C, D, and E are all physical. And if you rebel against what Hashem wants, then E, F, G, H, I, and J are going to happen, and they're all physical. All the promises and all the warnings are physical. If the real reward is the world to come, why is it that you have? Now, you see, this really, by saying it now, it sounds like 2 different questions. Why not tell me about the world to come? And why tell me about this world? Why not tell me about the world to come? He answered the previous chapter, because he can't do that. But why tell me about this world? What happens in this world isn't the reward. It isn't the reward. Why should it depend upon what you do? This world should be trivial. It should be random. Whatever happens doesn't matter. Because the reward is getting the world to come, and the punishment is losing out on the world to come. You have it in Kriya Shema. You have it everywhere. All of these promises and warnings are in this world. Kigon sova v'ra'av, being satisfied with what you have or being in starvation. Milchama v'shalom, war and peace. Malchus v'shiflus, where you have your own kingdom, or being under the heel of someone and being of a very low state. Yeshivat Ohr v'Golos, either having inhabiting the land of Israel or being in exile. Or the productiveness of your actions to, let's say, in agriculture or business or whatever it is, or losing your possessions through the loss of your projects. All the other things which are in the covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made with us and involves all of those things. Why is it that way? Now, the Rambam's answer is this, which we'll just have a chance to see briefly, and then we'll elaborate on it next time. All of those promises are true. They did come true, and they will come true. And when we do all of the mitzvahs of the Torah, all of the goods of this world will accrue to us. We will receive all the goods of this world. Now, I'm not sure exactly how to take the goods of this world, when the word goods there is written in scare quotes. Since he's told you the real good is the world to come, so goods of this world means the things that people think of as good, or the things that the Torah promises for good behavior, which is good in a worldly sense, but don't confuse it with the real good, which is the world to come. Now, okay. Ubezman shano ovrim aleihem tikolano haros aksuvos. And when we violate the commandments that God gave us, then the bad things which He has warned us about will occur to us. V'afal pikain, even so, ein osan hatovos hein sof matan scharon shel mitzvahs. They are not the end of the giving of the good of the mitzvahs. V'lo osan haros hein sof hanikama shenokmin may over al kol mitzvahs. And the suffering in this world, or the reverses in this world, are not the end of the punishment that a person gets for rebelling against the Torah. So now we have a new concept. There's reward. There's a beginning of reward, and then the end. And the Torah's description is the description of the beginning. The tragic mistake is to confuse the beginning with the end. And that's a terrible mistake. But the promises are promises because they are promises of something which counts as the beginning of reward. Now the question is, what does beginning of reward mean? What does it mean by beginning? And next week when we have a chance to go through the rest of it, he'll elaborate in great detail. But I'll tell you the analogy that I have for this. Someone does me a great favor. And I say to him, I owe you a lot. And here's what I'm going to do for you. These are the keys to the warehouse. Take the keys and take 2 packages from the warehouse. They're labeled. Take whatever you want, and that's what I'm giving you. Now imagine the guy takes the keys and says, but these are just pieces of metal. They're just slivers of metal. This is junk. It's not worth more than $1. What kind of reward is that? Yeah, right, but they're the keys to the warehouse, right? So the beginning of your reward is, I'm giving you the keys to the warehouse. Isn't that good? Aren't you happy now? Don't you say thank you when you get the keys to the warehouse? But of course you don't eat the keys to the warehouse. You don't wear them, they're not clothes. They're the key to get what the good thing is. So it turns out that the promises of results of your mitzvos in this world are things in this world which enable you to get to the world to come. And the promises, the threats, I should say, of what happens if you fail to live up to the Torah are the threat of losing the things which will enable you to get to the world to come, like losing the keys to the warehouse. So, are these things really good and really bad? Yes. Are they really intrinsically good and intrinsically bad? No, they're only good as a means. Only hurt as a loss of a means. They're like the keys to the warehouse. So, that's, I think, the right way to translate his words, tchilas scharon, the beginning of the schar. You're getting something good. It is really good, but it's good as a means to get something else that's intrinsically good. When Chazal say, schar b'hayam aleika, there's no reward in this world, what they mean is the essential reward, the thing which is the intended consequence, which is the compensation for what you do. That is not in this world. But in this world, you have means given to be able to get to that intended reward. So those things are valuable, but they're valuable only as a means, not as an end. This is something which he discusses in a certain passage in the guide, which I'm working on something now, and I wrote to try to understand it. I think it's a very profound idea that he has. It needs to be worked out carefully and with certain qualifications. But the idea that all of the things that we call good in this world aren't good for themselves. They have no intrinsic value. No intrinsic value. It's not that the world to come outweighs the other things, is more precious, it's of much higher value. No. Only things in this world are only valuable as a means to get to that world. So we'll talk about that more next time. Yeah.
So then, how would it apply the notion that each Jewish soul has a portion of the Olam Haba, since perhaps?
Oh, you mean because we're saying you're asking Kol Yisrael Chelik Olam Haba, every Jew has a portion of the world to come. If the Rambam says that some can be lost, right? How do you explain that?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. You asked that question, okay? But you see, you're quoting from a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, and the Mishnah goes on. The next words are, "Ve'ela she'ein lehem chelik olam haba." These are the ones that don't have a portion in the world to come. The very same Mishnah. Forget about knowing it from outside and verses and the very same Mishnah says it. So it means roughly one or two things. Either, as I've mentioned to you on prior occasions, I'll make a general statement. General statements tolerate exceptions. Yeah. They aren't meant to be universal and absolute. That's the way Chazal's language works. Or it means that there's a kind of default position. A person is assigned a portion of the world to come, but he can lose it. Through very dedicated evil activity, dedicated and consistent evil activity, he can lose it. But it doesn't mean he didn't have one assigned. They have, but it can be lost. Those are two ways to understand what it means. But the Mishnah forces it on you, because the Mishnah says itself, here's a list of people who don't have a share. Okay? So it's not a clever contradiction found in the tradition. Okay, you should daven well, and you should be able to hear the shofar well. You should feel the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and